As I watched my brother start smoking pot and drinking, my friend Bruce and I basically started making fun of my brother and his friends. They were stoners. Look at Bill, they're total stoners. My friend Bruce and I ended up making a movie called Is It All Worth It?, which is basically about kids that start smoking pot. The movie is on YouTube. You can watch it if you like. It's basically like Reefer Madness from the 70s. It's a warning of the dangers of marijuana. The irony is just amazing. Bruce and I ended up winning a local filmmakers award because we submitted the film into the contest. And when we went to accept the award, we were high ourselves. So in the short time between we had made the film, warning others about the dangers of smoking pot, we had started smoking weed. The first thing we did was we decided to get drunk. We wanted to get our hands on some alcohol. And one day we went to church with the Petersons in the morning, and they had a church donation bin. And lo and behold, someone had put a bottle of homemade wine in the church donation bin. So while Bruce's parents are at the main church service and Bruce and I are supposed to be at Sunday school, Bruce snuck out, and we stole the bottle of wine out of the donation bin, took it to his parents' car, hid it under the car seat, and smuggled it home. So we smuggled the bottle of wine home, went down into Bruce's room, and proceeded to drink alcohol for the first time in our lives. We drank a full bottle of wine between the two of us. I probably don't need to tell you much more. Of course, we ended up absolutely drunk out of our minds. We stumbled down to Kenmore and ended up getting sick and just all this insanity. So that was my first introduction to getting high. I had always been into music my whole life. I was a huge Elton John fan, and the first albums I ever bought was when I was 6 years old. I went into a record store and spent my birthday money to buy the Beatles' Let It Be and Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, both of which were new releases the week that I went in there to spend my birthday money. I loved music. I used to sit endlessly with my headphones on and play these records over and over again. Bruce and I and my friend Scott really got into the Beatles, and I had been playing guitar since I was 5 years old. So Bruce and Scott and Bob and I, we started a band. We were called Iosis, and there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff from our early band days on my channel if you want to look at it. So I went from being a Star Wars freak into a pot-smoking musician very quickly, and I lost all my weight. I thinned out. I was a teenager. I grew my hair out long. We dressed like hippies, even though it was the late 70s, early 80s, and our music was better than all the music that our peers were listening to. And we loved music, and we were all creative, and we made films, and we made recordings of original songs, and we made movies, and all that stuff's on YouTube if you want to look at it. But by then I was just stoned all the time, and I was smoking weed for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, literally 3 or 4 times a day, every day before school, lunch break, after school, and at night. So I was into it. And, my friends and I, because we were into the Beatles and into the whole mystic spirituality of George Harrison and Lennon talking about taking acid, and my friends and I started taking acid. Don't ever let anyone tell you that celebrities don't have an influence on the kids who worship them, because they most certainly do. And don't ever let anyone tell you that marijuana is not a gateway drug. It most certainly is. And we made that transition from alcohol to marijuana to acid very quickly, and then to psychedelic mushrooms and all those kinds of things. And, I was just kind of pursuing more of what I had already tasted, which was being high. And of course, acid had this whole level of pseudo spirituality to it, which I now know because I've tasted real spirituality. It's all totally fake. It's a false imitation of a spiritual experience. I experienced what it felt like to feel intense love for my friends and being connected with the nature around me. I had all those profound experiences, but it wasn't real. Iosis was running on all thrusters, and we were just constantly making music, and we were really serious about music, and we became good musicians, and we were basically starting to play professional gigs within a couple of years, 3 years. Music was my passion. And Iosis, the Iosis band, it was more than a band. It was kind of like an ideal. And it wasn't just the guys in the band. It was our friends who were part of this little artistic culture. But it was fun. It was a really wonderful time. We did a lot of creative work, which I'm so proud of. And we didn't just sit around getting high all the time. We actually produced a lot of really great movies and music and recordings and video and comedy stuff. And I'm really thankful for that we were always very motivated and creative. All along as this music was happening and we were doing all this creative work, I began to invest more into my spiritual life. And it was mainly fueled by the interest that George Harrison had in the Hare Krishna movement and Eastern religion, Eastern mysticism. I started getting really serious about it. And there was a friend of mine whose brothers were in the Hare Krishna movement. And they were the coolest guys. They didn't shave their heads. They weren't full-on Krishna guys because they were musicians, and they were good musicians. They lived right up the street from us, and in the front yard, they'd set up their drums and guitars and play, and they were great. It was so cool, and I was so inspired by them. But they were into the Hare Krishna movement, and so I started really paying attention to them, and they talked about vegetarianism and spirituality, and they used to make fun of anyone that ate meat. It was like this joke. They'd see a commercial for McDonald's on TV, and they go, "Oh, look at that, look at them," So I started getting really interested in Hare Krishna, and I had the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Krishna Bible, essentially. I never had it, and I was reading it, and I was like trying to glean truth out of it. I knew there was a God. I guess I had reached a point where I wanted to know which God it was, and they had their own deity, but of course they involved Jesus in the picture, as all religions do. All religions fit Jesus in somehow. Either he's a great prophet or one of the great prophets, etc. One time I asked my mom and dad if I could go with these older guys to a Hare Krishna temple in Seattle. And my parents said, absolutely not. I was so mad. And I was just like, under my breath, I'm thinking, you guys don't know anything. You're old fashioned. You don't know what's real. You don't, all the things that teenagers think. Oh my goodness. But I continued to pursue reading the Bhagavad Gita and really starting to get really into it. I was reading interviews with George Harrison and everything he had to say about it, anything I could get my hands on. And one day I was with these older guys and my buddy, and we're driving down the road, and there is a field of cows on the side of the road. They pulled over the car, and they got out of the car, and they were stopping to wave at the cows. They were waving, going, "Hi, hey," to these cows. That was a major light bulb moment for me. I went, oh, okay, I get it. They literally think these cows are divine. And in that moment, I knew that that was not the truth. I remember very distinctly, oh, that's not truth. That's not right. That's when I dropped the whole Hare Krishna thing. I realized it in that moment. No, that's not it. A lot of people that get into music and become songwriters, they do it because they want to become famous, or they want the girls. That was not my passion. My passion was to be a great musician, to write great songs. And I used to have visions. The vision was having a platform to speak truth to people. It was about having a message and having people focused on me enough to where they would listen to that message. I was kind of fueled by my interest in John Lennon, and I saw what an impact John Lennon was having in culture with the peace movement and those things. But when I would imagine myself speaking to people, it was about God and it was about love. Eventually, I moved out of my house, and my friends Bruce and Scott, they moved out, and we moved into a house together with my brother, and it became kind of a music house, a band house. And it was our first experience living away from our parents, and it was an adventure. But we were always totally broke. We were spending our money on weed, and then the way we survived was by buying bags of potatoes. Buying bags of potatoes and either baking them on a sheet or frying them in this really crummy, cheap oil. So we'd either eat potatoes or popcorn. Yeah, that's pretty much how we survived. Weed, potatoes, and popcorn. But we had so much fun in that we were always playing music and doing creative projects. And while we were living in that house, my friend Derek Turner and I, who was also part of our little artistic clan, he moved into the house. And Derek and I and Bruce started working on a film, an idea of a movie called Pimpy. This film was shot on Super 8 black and white movie film. If you watch the film, it's a really interesting film. It ended up winning several awards in international film festivals, and it has these very deep but unintended statements about Pimpy's father being addicted and how Pimpy deals with it, how Pimpy basically escapes from what he sees his father doing. These are all things that were not intentional. They just came out as Derek and I were writing this film. It's very fascinating for me to look back on now. In the mid-'80s, I ended up joining a band called the Britt'ns. The Britt'ns were a band that were the first band to do a tribute. And our tribute wasn't to a specific band, but our tribute was, quote, to the music of the 60s and early 70s, unquote. And we learned note-perfect renditions of all these great classic rock songs. We became really popular. We were making really good money, and we were one of the hottest bands in Seattle. I got so much experience playing live, and I really learned how to perform because we were playing constantly. And that was excellent for me as a musician. And while we were touring, I was always working on songwriting, and it was fun. We were a family too, and we had a mission. Our mission was to tell the world that all this older music blows away anything that's coming out now. It was a mission, and we were a family. We were like the five-headed monster that would go into any town that we were visiting and go to the record shops or the used clothing stores to try and buy cool vintage clothes and things like that. And it was so cool, and it was such a great little family that we had, and our mission was to play this great music and to play it perfectly like it was on the record.